So in our GAR contracts, we have a hierarchy of provisions that help us fully write a clear contract. We have our body of our contract, or the main body, and then sometimes we will have amendments, exhibits, and special steps. But the hierarchy of our contracts have two main bodies, and that would be exhibits and special steps. But today we're just going to talk about special steps. When I do teach contracts, I split it up in 2 days because it's so much, and I don't know any class that can really fully give it all to you without overwhelming you. But with the GAR contracts, we have special steps that are written by our GAR counsel, and as well as reviewed by our contract committee. So a lot of times special steps happen because we have something that consistently happens. For instance, when COVID was around, we had what? Special steps for COVID. We probably don't use them as much now. If you are someone who still practices that, that's fine, because COVID did not go away, although we can move freely again, but it did not go away. We have special steps to make sure there's clear understanding, but we want to make sure that we're using special steps in the correct fashion. What I find as a broker, people tend to write special steps over something that's already in the contract, and I'll show you why that can be a problem. So for you to understand special steps, let's take one step back. Even though we're not going to talk about exhibits, I want to explain what an exhibit is. An exhibit controls over the main body of the contract. Okay, so you'll write your purchase and sale agreement, and then you'll add exhibits, your financing exhibit, your due diligence, your, all these different things that are in the contract that you want to add to. Okay. But a special step that controls over exhibits. All right. So for instance, in the main body of a contract, you might have, I don't know, let's think of an example, maybe a different, let's think of something. Anybody got anything on their mind? Because mine is not working real good today. Special step controls over exhibits. So, or any other portion of the contract that might conflict. All right, so let's look at examples. Let's sip a little of that so I don't start coughing. So the mistakes that are made, which is why special steps and exhibits exist, can be mistakes of the law, Georgia law, real estate law, or it could be mistake of facts. And so those special steps can clear those type of things up. So for instance, let's clarify what I just said. If the contract is clear in a court of law, they will most likely enforce as written, because our contract says everything must be in writing. So when we say all this texting, emailing, verbal, blah, 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 my intentions and so on and so forth, a judge is not going to listen to that. And most likely, if you ever have a grievance, they're not going to go by that either. They're going to go by what was written. So that's why it's smart to write clear and concise contracts. If you happen to have this go as far as court or some type of mediation, your intent is not permitted as a testimony. Okay, I intended to add that special step. I intended to do this. I intended to do that. We can't clarify intentions, but we can clarify what's written. Any questions there, or any ahas or comments to that? All right, so GAR versus the Georgia court system. Obviously, we take care of things in our own little bubble. You have a contract, you're with a brokerage, and you have a broker who will help you navigate disputes in some cases. You, of course, will do your best, and then sometimes we get involved because there's a misunderstanding about the contract or the wording or so on and so forth. Most of the time when I get involved, anyone that's in my Midtown office, they know that I hold the mirror up to them first. Because if they've not written a clear, concise contract or a poorly written special step that doesn't close the loop, we have to clear that up first before we can go attack the other side. Okay, I know attack is a strong word, but that's what usually is the case when I'm involved. So in a Georgia court, courts have their own rules. So a judge is going to look at your contract and make their own judgment based on their interpretation. And if they see any conflicts or anything like that in the contract, they're going to address that. And they're not thinking like realtors or brokers. They're thinking court of law. So you don't ever want it to get that far, but many agents in our industry have gone that far before. I've had, not me personally, but as a broker, I've had to represent someone and we won. And then there are situations where not represent, but be a part of a court system and they lost. And once I was sitting there for an eviction hearing, and I saw a friend of mine from another company that was there, and he also lost because the judge interpreted in their own rules. So, and when that happens in our bubble, maybe we would have been right, but in a court of law, they're going to interpret the contract a little bit different. So what should you consider when you are writing special stips? If you're not asking yourself the following questions: what, when, where, who, how, and the most important that I see is always left out: what happens if? Usually you'll say in your special step what the situation is, when the situation will happen, where to deliver something, who is going to do it, buyer, seller, agent, so on and so forth, how it will be done. But then we forget to say, and by the way, if you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. This is when the broker gets involved, because everyone's fighting back and forth about, I said all the intentions happen. But then when I read it and I go through this in my head, then I have to turn the mirror on everyone to say, but no one said what happens if, and that's why you're here today. Any questions or ahas about that? All right, so your contracts or your package that you usually have in Command or Remind, whichever one you're using, or Gmail, wherever you're writing, or not Gmail, Georgia MLS, wherever you're writing your contracts and offers, you will have an index of special steps. These are already pre-written by an attorney for you. And what I find is people are writing special steps that don't follow the previous slide. But if you look at the special steps indexed, you will see they're already written and they cover every single thing to protect you, your buyers, your seller, and the contract. The index is broken down just like our contracts are broken down into different categories. So there's special steps. The 100 series covers contingencies, agriculture and land. Land is a big thing right now. We've got a lot of fraud going on with land deals these days, and I have an example of that. Due diligence and the inspection reports. Earnest money, this is a huge one. When Tom does broker strategy call, typically this earnest money is his pet peeve because he deals with it a lot. We do as well in Midtown, but for the most part, we usually get it worked out and handle it pretty well. But it is the number one thing that we have a problem with in our industry when it comes to earnest money. Barbara, go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone I haven't said it to yet. And Miss Deborah, it's great to see you, and I'm sorry you're not feeling so good.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to piggyback off what you just mentioned about the special stipulations, because when we try to write our own special stipulations, we could mess around and void out something in our contract.
thank you for saying that. That's exactly right. That's why it's so important. And I felt like this is a great subject for you guys, because typically as a broker, when a situation comes about, sometimes an agent will say, will you read the special stip? And I'm going, well, why are they writing this? Point it out to them in paragraph 8. It's already there. You now have eliminated some of the protections from paragraph 8 by writing your own special stip, which, by the way, doesn't cover what, when, where, how, what happens if. Okay. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. And Happy New Year to you. Finance, we do have a lot of finance situations that go on, and then miscellaneous, and then last, property conditions. You'll notice in the index, everything is broken down by their title, and then their SS means special stip, and then their designated number. All right, so did everyone get the handout? I want to make sure you have the handout because we're going to go over that now. So pull that out. Hopefully you're looking at the handout that is highlighted. So if you're not looking at the handout, can someone let me know if all the handouts went through, first of all? I see a question here.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Janet, did you just come on board, or can you scroll up and see the handout?
I logged in about 5 minutes ago, so I missed that.
You missed it? Let me see if I can send it one more time. Hold 1 second, everybody.
Thank you.
Sometimes in Zoom, it for some reason doesn't stay there. Handout and special step. All right, see if you have it now. How about everyone else?
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Go ahead. Someone was going to say something.
Yes, did you put it in the group chat again for Janet?
I put it in the group chat.
Oh, I see it now.
It
There might be a delay with internet and stuff like that. Okay, so let's jump into it. So on the first page, you see the contingencies and the first, and I'm using the special stipulations broken out into its definitions. The previous slide is giving you an index if you need to just glance at that real quick to find the category you need, and then you go to the corresponding number. This particular handout, also in your GAR package, is the breakout of each one. So let's take a look at the first page. On the first page, you'll notice I highlighted 110, no commission owed by the buyer. Now, when we first started talking about commissions, and a buyer might say, hey, I don't want to pay you your commission. Hopefully you will get that from the seller, and so on and so forth. Our language has changed in 2024 in light of all the lawsuits, and thank goodness Keller Williams, we have resolved that, and so we can move past that and press on. It's a good thing if you don't understand it. It is a good thing. 70 million is a lot of money, but it's a good thing for us as agents and moving on to doing better and making sure we have our unique value proposition with our buyers and sellers, which in Georgia, we basically have always spelled this out in our GAR contracts. It's kind of the other states that aren't protected that way, but we have always been protected that way. But someone is always going to copycat and challenge it. So in the event that a buyer feels like they want something in writing, I'll get a call saying, well, the buyer wants something in writing that I'm not going to owe them, or they're not going to owe me a commission. Then you can use this special stip. It's already written for you. By the way, sometimes a special stip is not quite everything you need. You can still use this as a guide as long as you follow that previous slide, what, when, where, how, and what happens if. Okay, let's look at page 2. On page 2, I really didn't highlight any, but it goes into the agriculture and the land section. So if you are working with out in rural areas, or doesn't necessarily in Metro Atlanta, we have some areas that have farms and agriculture and land, and maybe something that you're listing that a builder would want to buy from you, or just someone who wants to buy it from you to build their forever home, that kind of thing. There's lots of different things here. For those of you that have never sold land that might have timber on it, there's timber on it that can be sold or cut down or protected by Corps of Engineers. All these different things sometimes will need an additional special step. So let's take a look at page 3. I highlighted irrigation systems. So sometimes a home will have an irrigation system. You may or may not indicate that in the seller's disclosure, but let's say the irrigation system doesn't work or something like that. You could put this in to make sure that it does work if you don't have a chance to test it, if the inspector didn't test it, so on and so forth. I think we always think about an inspection of checking the roof and the plumbing and the electrical, but you forget those things on the outside of the home, like irrigation systems or a well, or I don't know, maybe solar panels, things of that nature. We're starting to see a lot of solar panels lately, so good luck with that one. I've had that experience. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. You'll drop down, and the next category is due diligence. So in due diligence, flood zone warranty. This seems to be coming up quite a bit. I don't know if you realize, but when you go into your tax records of FMLS and Georgia MLS, there's a tab that says flood. If you click that, it will open it. Let's say you're searching for 123 Main Street and you need the tax information. You'll see the tab that says tax information and a couple other tabs on there. The very last one, or second to the last, would be, I think the last is assessor map, but also right before that, there should be a flood button. You can click that and it will show you a purple shaded area. If that house is sitting smack dab in a purple shaded area, it's in a floodplain. So I had someone call me one time who said, I'd like to know, I like this property, but it's been on the market for 738 days. I didn't need to look it up. I already knew what was wrong with it. That's my background, first of all, from where I came from before real estate. And I already knew what the problem was. There was either something wrong in the ground and it wasn't buildable, or it was in a floodplain. So which one do you think it was? It was a floodplain. So I was able to send that to that potential buyer who was curious about why. And I said, this is why it's sitting there. Now, being in a floodplain is sort of kind of not a bad thing. What you have to see is, where is it located in relation to where you want to build the home, and also whether or not you have to have flood insurance or not. And that's something you can talk to the insurance company. They would be able to look up the address and tell you, yes, if you build a home here, you will have to have flood insurance, and this is approximately how much it would cost. You can also look at FEMA.gov and look on there, but we already have that built into our MLS system. So those are the two places you could go. Any questions about that? Okay. The next one is kick out provision of your due diligence. And then right below that is repairs or defects that we're not able to inspect due to seasonal effects. So seasonal means we're in our winter season, and sometimes you're not able to fully inspect that air conditioning unit because it's winter and we're using our furnaces and things of that nature. So you may want to say, we weren't able to fully check this, and because we were not, here's what we want to say about that. That would be one of the reasons you'd use that. And then a kick out, we used to have a complete form for that, and that was changed to this special stip. There's a lot of things in special stip that used to be forms that are now just a special stip. And basically, sometimes a seller says, I'll look at your offer, but I want to keep my house on the market. Has anybody ever had that example? Mm-hmm. And you probably, if you don't know any better, said, no, we're under contract, we're binding, we can't do that. Well, you can. You can if all parties agree to it with the special stip. What would be a good reason to do that? Many of you who have had listings, I want you to answer that because it's happening daily. Janet? Janet?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
In Tennessee, we call it the first right of refusal, but it protects the seller just in case let's say the buyer also has a home to sell, and the seller doesn't want to get caught up in the contract and reduce or add to their days on market. It protects the seller to say, hey, even though we're here in this contract, if I find a better offer, I'm going to give you the first opportunity to clear that, contingency or whatnot, but still offer my home for sale on the market.
Right.
I hope I said that right.
Yes, you did. You did. What's another example? There's another example, if you're not thinking about it, but you get very frustrated about it. An investor. I'll give you a hint.
Um,
Now I'm hearing the, oh yeah. Who was that? They don't want to admit. Was that you, Chris? No,
No, that wasn't me,
that
but
wasn't you. So go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that for me, I've got some land deals, and I feel like this has been super useful for just the concept of not writing over the contract itself, and kind of getting out of the way. I mean, the goal is to have the contract be live and binding, and any judge is going to try to make that happen. That's the goal, right?
Yes.
And so just staying out of the way of that is valuable information for me today.
Good, 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 good. So one of the things I want to jog your memories, because some of you are forgetting because it was too painful. An investor says, hey, I'm going to pay all cash for your house. You, the listing agent, get excited, seller gets excited, and then they play the okie doke on you and say, you know, it's cash, but I'm going to need 60 days to close, 60 business days for due diligence. And oh, by the way, I'd like to assign it. Anybody else getting those type of offers? I hear about them daily. That should be a red flag. First of all, if you have cash, it's either going to be in a brown paper bag under a mattress. If they are telling you they need 30 days, it better be in some kind of account that they only fund once a month. Okay. And they have to wait for that to happen. Otherwise, there's no real reason that cash needs to take 30 days unless maybe it is a land, as Chris is talking about, that they may have to do some due diligence, perk tests, surveys, things of that nature. But if it's just a property, why can't we close in anywhere from 7 to 10 days? Enough time for the attorney to prepare everything for you to close. So you might want to say to that person, you know, we like your offer, but we're going to give you first right of refusal. We're going to continue to market this property. And if you're able to fulfill all of your contingencies by this due date and close, you're golden. If not, and we get something else better that we can verify, we're going to go with that. So that's one reason you might want to use something like this. Was anybody aware that this special step was here? It has been here for many, 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 many years. No? Yes? I guess that's an
Yes,
answer.
No,
ma'am.
Okay,
I
cool.
have.
I did not. I'd never come across it.
Okay, cool. So good, good, good. So you're taking something away today. I love it. Let's
I'm
look at the
aware
next
that
page.
it was there, Deborah, but I'm sure you know that I was aware of it.
Yes, yes.
And I'm getting ready to have to leave too, Deborah, because I'm at the real estate conference downtown and I got to go back to my class. But I always enjoy you guys.
Barbara, I'm always so honored that you took the time to jump in and always add to the chat. So thank you for that. And bring us back some nuggets for next time.
I sure will. Thank you, darling.
Thank you,
Have a
guys.
great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Next page, repair or replace named items after closing. Seller's obligation survives. This is also in the contract that if the seller has agreed to something in that contract, that survives closing. What realtors tend to do is say, we're not closing, or the buyer says, we're not closing. But you really could write a special stip to say it survives. Yes, it's risky because what if they're moving to another state or whatever the case may be? I'm only giving you the special steps that are available to you. You have to determine whether it makes sense for your particular transaction. Repair of the repair is being done after loan approval. Why would a seller want to do this? They don't want to spend all this money on your buyer and then find out, oh, the loan wasn't approved. And they could have, you know, maybe it's something they should have fixed anyway, but let's use something simple like the outlet plate is cracked and the seller says, oh, I'll go to Home Depot and get, 10 of them. They cost 10 cents or whatever and fix it. That's not a big deal, but it's the time, the effort, and so on and so forth. And maybe it should have been fixed anyway before it went on the market. But if they were buying the home as is or with just a few repairs, maybe this might be a reason to say, you know what, I'll do your repairs, but I'm not going to start doing them until after the loan approval, because then we know we're already halfway through getting this done. Loan approval could mean loan and appraisal. You could add that, so on and so forth. All right. Repairs paid by seller, and you could limit the cost. So sometimes someone will say, well, you know, we want you to repair this and it's probably going to be X amount of dollars. Let's call it 5,000. Seller could counter back and say, I'll do those repairs, but I'm only going to cap it at 2,500 or something like that. I don't think, I've used this before in the past. I've not seen anybody use this, and because everything's negotiable. So if a seller, if you're a listing agent and you go and you say, you really need to fix this, well, I don't want to fix it before we get an offer. And I would probably use something like a boss cat to find out what it would cost to fix whatever the situation is, so that you have a number or your favorite handy person. And then that way the seller could cap it off and say, we already got quotes and we know it's 2,500 and that's the cap that we're going to give you for whatever. Okay. Repairs made by seller during the transaction is another good one. Jump down to survey reveals less acreage. So I don't know if you remember from pre-license, but when we're quoting acreage, you're supposed to use a plus or minus sign. So let's say it's 1.5 acres, you would have a plus and minus sign in front of that. Because as realtors, unless you own it and you've surveyed it, do you actually know that you're selling a property that sits on 1 acre or selling a piece of land that sits on 1.5 acres? You don't know that. And there are lawsuits for quoting something that you really didn't know. Same thing with our square footage. You know, that's why we have a pull down menu to say, where did you get this? Did it come from an appraisal? Did it come from the tax records? So on and so forth. So be very careful when you take a property and someone says, now how many acres? Oh, it's 1 acre. Do you know that? Because you are quoting something that someone else told you, but you didn't survey it. All right. I heard a aha or a groan somewhere. Does somebody want to unmute and have an example, or they were just saying,
That was me again. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
I was interested in at the bottom of this special stip. It talks about if property has less acreage than referenced above, this right to terminate shall be deemed to have been waived.
Yeah.
So if you don't figure
Mhm.
that out within the agreed amount of time, you can't go back.
Right, exactly. So it just depends on what side of the fence you're on, whether this special stip makes sense for you.
Mhm.
Because how many people buy land and say, oh, I'm going to build on it. And then they find out, oh, I thought this was 2 acres. I was going to build my house on 1 acre and sell the other acre. And then they find out the other acre is in a flood zone and only a half acre of it is buildable.
Mhm.
You see how that could be a problem? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's very important when it's not just land, it could be a house sitting on a nice, lot, and you just want to make sure most of the time the seller didn't do a survey. Lenders don't require surveys anymore. When I started in 96, surveys were required to close. And when they took that away, all kinds of things started happening and are still happening. I don't know if it'll ever come back, but it should. But if you are buying something and yourself, or you're advising your client as far as the buyer is concerned, always make sure you suggest to them to have a survey. It's up to them to waive that. But what you don't want is for them to say, you sold me a house and you said it was on 1 acre, and I found out later it's only 3/4 of an acre. Or in a situation I had in East Cobb with one of my real estate attorney clients, her house was built on the wrong lot in the cul-de-sac. Ruh-roh. That was fun, but we got it worked out. Believe it or not, everything can be worked out. And the next door neighbor was paying part of the taxes of the house, of the lot she actually owned. So it was a big mess, but luckily she was a real estate attorney and it was fixed quite quickly. So you just never know. And of course, that was never surveyed. The neighbor had a fence. The fence had to come down because it was on her property, and so on and so forth. So definitely suggest surveys, even though the lender doesn't require. Termite reports, we don't see that too much anymore unless a buyer specifically wants it, or if you're dealing with a VA type loan, but here are some special steps for that. Let's go to the next page where I talk about utilities. Sometimes you will go to a house and do an inspection in your due diligence and all the utilities are not on. In the event that should happen, let's say you're doing a quick due diligence, but for 1 or 2 days or something like that, maybe 3. But you get there and all the utilities are not on. So this could be something you could put in to say, look, our date will start once all the utilities are on. The reason you would know the utilities are not on because you went to look at the house to say, we're going to make an offer on this. So if you walk in and lights are not on, or maybe you might not get a bank to do this for you. Sometimes an REO agent has already done it, or you can call the utility company and they have temporary services. I don't know what it costs now. Back when I did them, it was like $25 for 3 days. So if anybody's on here who knows the latest, I don't know what it is now. It might be more than that, but they'll turn it on for 3 days and you pay the $25 deposit. That'll cover whatever the 3 days worth of utilities, and then they'll shut it back off again. So always check into that. So if you have a seller who says, oh, I don't want to turn the utilities on, you might ask them and say, well, they have a special service that you can turn it on for a couple of days for a certain amount of money, and then you can turn it back off if you want. Okay. Walkthrough list items completed after closing. This is one of the big complaints that come to me about walkthrough. I don't know how soon you guys are doing walkthroughs. I always suggest they need to be at least a day or 2 before closing. This walkthrough an hour before could be a second walkthrough because things could be stolen or damaged overnight. So you do want to make sure. I think I had a walkthrough one time and we did it a couple days before, and then we did our final one an hour or so before closing, and the AC was gone. And it was an REO property. So the bank, when I called them and told them, they replaced it. But that's your business. You're the entrepreneurs here as to what your system is for your clients and walkthroughs and so on and so forth. But in the event that you walk through and there were repairs that were supposed to be made by a seller and they're not completed, you can also have a special stip for that. And then we already talked about surveys. General liability insurance coverage. Sometimes this is usually typical with a builder. If your buyer is going to have their own inspector during the building process, they're going to require, insurance and so on and so forth. But you may have a situation with high-end properties, a luxury client who may have certain things in the home, a special vase from France or whatever, and I don't want anybody to knock it over. They may say you've got to have some kind of insurance or something like that. I don't see this very often. I mainly pointed it out because you do have it. And for those of you that maybe work in some luxury markets, that might be something that a seller might bring up to you. The next section is earnest money deposit, additional earnest money. And that happens, for me, it happens when someone wants to go beyond what our original contract says. And in the event they want to do that, we may ask for additional earnest money and so on and so forth. So that's another example of a special stip that is commonly used. Now, I hear this term all the time, and I want you to change your language. There is no such thing as non-refundable earnest money. It's lazy language. I use it. You're probably using it. But technically, because this is a learning Zoom, there's no such thing as non-refundable. There's earnest money. But then if we're going to convert it to a non-refundable deposit, then this is the special stip you should be using. Who just had an aha? Or is it just me?
I did.
I did.
And how many of us, I'm raising my hand, I've stopped doing it years ago, but the first time I heard it, I'm like, oh, MG. There's no such thing as non-refundable earnest money. Stop saying that. Earnest money is to be used for closing or given back to the buyer or given to the seller if there's a default. But then if you tell someone, well, if you want 2 more days, you need to give us a non-refundable deposit, which means you're going to lose it and it's going to go to the seller. But you're calling it non-refundable earnest money. Go ahead.
And
There's a lot of ahas
there's a
here.
difference between that and option money, like
Yes.
that seems somewhat nuanced, but yet a difference, correct?
Yes, 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 yes. Because the option, you're negotiating that to say, look at me, and you get to keep that automatically. So where the non-refundable deposit could be used in a situation like, okay, I'm sure many of you have had situations that have been around for a minute. This is our 3rd amendment to change the closing date at no charge. Okay. Number 3, we're going to charge you to get these extra days. And for the luxury of those extra days, we need a non-refundable deposit of XYZ. That's not option money.
So Deborah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
With this one here, what I'm understanding this to be is, in addition to the earnest money that's already been submitted,
Right.
if there's an issue that they're saying, if we use this SS402, that the additional maybe 1,500 is what would be non-refundable, or does that apply to the original?
No, it doesn't apply to the original unless you change the special step to say that.
Okay.
It could be that original earnest money is already gone because they've passed some contingencies or whatever, and they still need more time. And you're going, okay, this additional time is more than $1,000, because many of you use $1,000, although we're seeing higher and higher earnest money. So good for all of you doing that. But let's just say it's $1,000 and this person is on their 3rd, give me one more chance. Your sellers are getting a little upset. So you've got to make it worth their while to say, look, let me try to get some additional money for those additional days. And that money is going to be non-refundable. You're going to get it regardless. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, jump down to security deposit from the seller for temporary occupancy. So this used to be in the body of the temporary occupancy as a form, and then they changed it and made it a special stip, so that if you wanted to charge by the day and that type of thing, like a per diem. Under the financing, if you have a bankruptcy client, if they tell you we filed bankruptcy, we need to list our home, this used to be a form, now it's a special stip. So you want to add that in the original offer so that people will know that a 3rd party has to make a decision, just like a probate, just like a short sale, all of those type of things. Escrow account transfer for loan assumptions. I started talking about loan assumptions in my office probably 2 years ago, because I could see we were moving towards higher interest rates. People were still in love with the 2020 and 2021 interest rates. I knew that this new generation of agents, I don't mean in age, but just knowledge, you didn't live in the assumption world. I came from that world in '96. That was common, not so common in the 2000s. And so I started talking about it so that the agents would be educated on how does that work? And I didn't know that existed. It exists for FHA, VA, USDA, and there's a couple of others, but those are the main ones you need to know. I won't make this an assumption call, but if you have questions about it, speak to your broker, or you can call me as well. Exchange for buyers. Sometimes you're working with investors that want to do a 1031 exchange. Again, I won't use this time to talk about 1031 exchange, but if they're telling you they're going to do one, then you want to use whichever 1031 exchange special stip applies. When you turn the page, you'll see a second one utilizing section 1031 exchange for the seller. Interest rate fluctuations. This is a good one for you to know. This was very common for me to use back in the 90s. And now, do we not have that same situation going on with fluctuation? So let's say the interest rate at one time was tap dancing on 8. I don't think we ever got to 8, but we were tap dancing on it. But the person said, look, I'm willing to do 8, but if this thing goes to 10, I'm not going there, even if they qualify for it. Okay, because if they qualify for it, they still have to close. But if you add this interest rate fluctuation, which puts a cap on it, then they can say, you know what, if it happens to move, you know, one way or the other, I can still get out. I don't have to accept that loan. That's kind of what that is. This was very common to use in the 90s. Loan assumption contingency, we kind of talked about that already. Drop down to lender required repairs. This is, you'll see this in your purchase and sale agreement, but sometimes if there's some additional conversation that needs to be made about repairs, you can use this special step. But it's kind of redundant with what we already have in our contingencies on our financing. Development approval. So let's say Chris is selling a piece of land and that person has done their due diligence, but they also are going to do a VA loan. Well, you need to make sure that that development is going to be able to be approved by FHA or VA. So this could be an additional special step that you would add. The next page talks about receiving condominium questionnaire. I'm sure many of you that have had a condo and an HOA problem and a delay in your closing because that HOA did not get the questionnaire back in time. So there's fighting about, well, that's not our problem and I want the earnest money and so on and so forth. So putting this special step in could raise everyone's awareness in the event that you don't have any control over when this information is going to be given. But it also jogs everybody's memory to start that process immediately, because unfortunately the HOAs in this town work under a whole different mindset. I don't understand it, but and we've been fighting this, you know, your RPAC dollars at work here. In case you don't understand why you pay a board dues, some of the things that some of the luxuries we have, like homestead and things of this nature, are fought by our lobbyists at the Capitol. So please always donate to that if you can. But the HOA thing has been a thorn in the realtor side for many years, even before I was licensed. And we're still talking about it in 2024. Under miscellaneous assignments, I think a lot of you are hearing that word a lot more. It wasn't so prevalent when I first started. It's more of an issue these days. And our new contracts explain that the seller may or may not have given permission for something to be assigned. And so therefore, to make it clear, we have a special step for it, for an assignment and for the seller's consent. And then at the bottom, business days. Your contract is all calendar days except for certain instances in it that are spelled out as business days. But for the most part, your contract is calendar days. I get this question all the time, which is odd to me, but it's calendar days, meaning day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, Monday through, Sunday. However, if you change your contract to business days, then that's the special step you would use. And that changes everything in the contract from calendar to business. So when you get these investors that tell you, I want a due diligence of 7 business days, you're basically, depending on when they wrote the offer, giving them extra days. I'm sorry, does somebody have a question? Or somebody just has their mic off. Okay, on. All right. Turn the next page. Buyer shall list the property with broker contingency. Sometimes the investor will call an unsuspecting agent to say, sorry about that, let me turn that off. Would you list this property? I'm buying it, or I bought it, but really they're in an assignment situation. So you want to make sure that the seller is aware that this is happening, because our contracts have changed to say you can't do that. All right, so this is a special step that you could use. Buyer's request, seller to pay buyer broker commission. This is talking about all the things that we're dealing with the new buyer compensation conversation. We have special steps in here already written for us to talk about. Court permission, community association. I use this one quite a bit. Community association not required. If I do my research, I talk to the seller, they say there's no HOA. I use this on pretty much every contract that tells me that. That way I protect myself, the information that the seller has given me, and then that way, if something has changed or that's in the works, at the time that we were selling, there was no HOA. So that's just a staple in my contract writing. Conformed copy, say that the contract is messy and you can't read it, you've handwritten it. Then you do a conformed copy. You would add this to the clean copy of the contract, the newly written or typed contract. Court permission to sell could be probate, maybe divorce, things of that nature. We also have a divorce contingency. And then expiration of time limits. Your contract is calendar days and it ends at 11:59 p.m. So if you're changing that 11:59 p.m. to something else, that's a special stip you could use. If you have multiple offers, the next page, multiple offers, you have a multiple offer special stip. You have a rent proration. Let's say you are selling a house that has a tenant. You still have to honor that rent, that lease. Then you may want to use this rent proration. I use it on all properties that have a tenant, and to let my buyer know, you're buying a property with a tenant, that lease is not up until April. And by the way, when we close, landlord, you need to transfer all the financials, all the security deposits. And by the way, the rent that you received, you need to prorate my client. That's what this is. So if you're not doing this, you've left money on the table that your client should have received. Okay. School district, sometimes you have relocation people that want to be in a certain school district, or they hear through the grapevine that school districts are going to be remapped, and that would be a good special step to use. And that's something you would use during your due diligence to make sure that school district, if you're moving up the street, you want to make sure you're still in the same school district of Walton, then that would give you a special step to verify that and check that. And if it's not going to be, you could get out without any penalties. The next page talks about building permits and the ability. Chris has a piece of land, someone decides to buy it, they want to make sure they can get a building permit on it. You may want to add that in. Carpet to be professionally cleaned. Sometimes we want the seller to do something special, and to clean the house and make sure they clean the carpets. You want to probably say who you want to use it to, who you want to use, whether it's someone like a Stanley Steamer or something like that. Home warranty. If you're asking for a home warranty, usually I see in special steps, home warranty paid by seller. That's it. But if you look at SS 712, there's a little bit more meat to that special step. Who's going to order it? How much is it? All of that. So this is a great one to use. Multifamily zone contingency. For those of you trying to build multifamily, duplex, that kind of thing, that's a good one. Permit contingency, getting your permits. Fixtures, making sure they're in compliance. The DeKalb County has certain rules about their fixtures in the home. That could be something that you would add in there to make sure that they're in compliance. Property delivery, next page, property delivery condition. This could be used when you want the property to be in clean, get rid of all the trash, all that kind of stuff. You could add this. Let's see, seller's property disclosure not attached. So sometimes you're writing an offer, but you don't have the seller's property disclosure. You need to call the agent to get it. You might want to put this special step in to jog everybody's memory that I need it. And it tells you how many days you have to get it to me. Or sometimes your seller says, I don't want to fill that out. I don't want to fill any of it out. And therefore you would use, and this is one that I use quite a bit as well, seller property disclosure not provided. Don't ask, we're not giving you one. All right. And then the last page of this, unfulfilled conditions at closing. Here's your favorite, the one that delays your closing. And what should happen in the event that there's unfulfilled conditions at closing. You could say that at the front end of your contract so that you don't have that issue at the end of your contract. So all of those things. Now, obviously there are others in here that you can look at your leisure. However, I've highlighted the ones that are used the most in our industry in today's market. Any questions so far? Janet, you said, should either of these be presented to the seller as options or presented by the type of offer? Did we answer that, or was that something else?
That was regarding the repairs, all of the different special steps regarding repairs. Would it be best practice to give the seller those options up front so you know how to maneuver once you get an offer, or should that be on an offer basis?
You're going to have to make that call. I would say if you know it might be an issue from conversations with the agent up front, or you've walked through the house with the buyer, you could put it in the beginning. It could end up being an amendment later that you add that kind of thing in. So it just depends on where that special step would fall. We're calling it a special step, but there's nothing wrong with saying we're amending the contract and I'm putting this verbiage from special step in this amendment. You know.
Okay.
Okay.
I have another question, if I may.
Go right ahead.
So most of these special stipulations seem like they can be added in your offer, given you toured the property and whatnot, and you know how you're going to write the offer on behalf of your client. But in the event that there's an already ratified contract in place, then what would be sufficient for the special stipulation would be an amendment, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, let's test your skills. You can either join on web by going to pollev.com/dblue224 or text dblue224-2233. But the easiest is to scan your QR code and answer the question. 1, 2, 3, go. Let's see if everybody was paying attention, and through my sexy cold voice, you learned something today. Let's see if my system is working. I think it is. I think I logged in. While you're doing that, Joel said, is there a way to pull a special step into contract from command? The answer, I believe, is no. I use Remind, and when I type my contracts in Remind, you can append the contract right there while you're typing. So when you go to the special step section, 2 buttons pop up that say, 2 buttons pop up. One says clauses and one says new clauses. When you click clauses, it will show you all the special steps. And if you know the number, you can just type in the number and it'll pop up and you just click it and it'll add to your contract. Or new phrases or new clauses, meaning you're making up your own special step. I'm not sure. Someone help us here in Command if you've ever done. I think you have to copy and paste in Command, which is why I've been around since '96, so there was no such thing as Command. So the system in our MLS system has always been able to allow us to add the special steps without having to copy and paste. And yes, we had computers in 1996. Dot matrix and amber screens, but we had them big as your head, but we had them. All right, so it looks like you guys got that right. That is correct. Exhibits control over the main body of the contract in the event of a conflict between the contract and exhibit. All right, let's look at the next one. Stipulations, control over exhibits and any other portion of the contract in the event of a conflict between the special step and either the contract or the exhibit. So in other words, that's saying special steps control over exhibits and any other conflicting information in the body of the contract. What say you, group? And you are right. So my work is good. All right, so let me trip you up a little bit. Here's a question. Chris, pay attention. The parties sign an agreement to purchase land with a stream. The contract states that the buyer will build a home on the property However, after executing the purchase and sale agreement, the buyer discovers the home cannot be built due to setback restrictions, hint, hint. Which special stip would you use with that handout you have to protect? Now, in this one, when you scan, you'll have to type a number. You don't have to put the SS, you can just put a number. Test your knowledge of special steps. If you were writing this, what special step would you have put in here? And we'll probably have an array of answers. So think of your flood, think of your setback, think of your survey. Maybe your financing. All right, let's see what the answer is. So you could have used flood zone contingency. You could have used building permit contingency, setback zoning, and survey contingency. So obviously a flood because of the stream, you want to check that out. Building permit to make sure you could build the house with a stream to make sure that it's buildable. Another thing about land with water on it, and you're selling it and you're saying it's 1 acre, what if the only buildable part of the land is a ½ acre? Is that still viable to the buyer? No, I wanted a full acre on the stream. So then maybe that's not right for your buyer. Building permit, setback, that was the question. That's what the buyer found out. So if that 734 was in the contract, that would give a buyer it out. If that is not in there, and they say, and the seller says, well, you didn't say anything about wanting to make sure that there's a setback. So you're in breach. You know, I'm just making this up, but this is what happens in our industry when people get upset about the contract expiring. And then of course, survey contingency. Questions, comments, did this help you? Did you have an aha? I want to hear it in the last minute.
Yes,
This
that
is
a
pretty
poorly
good.
written stipulation could just negate things that are already in the contract.
Yeah.
That is something I had not thought about. I mean, it makes sense, but now I'm going to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and here's the thing, you guys, whether you are able to, I think Joel asked, append your contract, or if you kept that handout, you know, somewhere on your desktop to just pop open and go, let me see if there's anything in here I need to add in my offer. It's something I do every time. There are certain ones that I've already added in my remind folder that when I'm making an offer, there are certain ones I use on every contract, regardless. And so I just pop those in, and then I move forward with any additional special steps that are needed per the buyer. I heard another comment. Anybody else? Hey, Raven.
I was gonna say this helped me kind of know where what my options are for my clients and how to maneuver. Like you said, there are certain ones you use in every contract, no matter what. So that kind of put me in position to be more prepared instead of reactionary. If a situation happens, oh, well, we already got that covered, or you know what, this has come about, so this is what my options are. And this has really helped me because I'm functioning in 2 different states. So the verbiage is different, and some of the special steps we have to write here in Tennessee, but whereas Georgia, it's already done for you. So to know where those are was very, very helpful.
Great, great. All right, guys, well, it looks like I'm being kicked off of Zoom for another class. So thank you so much for attending. Look out for the next date in February for broker strategy call. And I thank you for being here, and have a great day. Go sell some real estate.
Thanks so much,
Deborah.
Deborah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Deborah.
Deborah.